Opened in 2014, the G-Link is an Australian light rail system that has been over a decade in the making. Yet still, despite having achieved everything it set out to do, Stage 4 was officially cancelled earlier this month, with a move that leaves the city with more questions than answers and a political decision that, according to transit experts, could become one of the current government's greatest failures. So, for a light rail that up until now has had virtually no criticism, what's gone wrong? And why has Stage 4 been cancelled when the only thing that should have been controversial was the price tag? Founded in 1959, the city of Gold Coast is located approximately 65 kilometers southeast of Brisbane, in Australia. It is home to nearly 630,000 people and in recent times has become a tourist hotspot thanks to its beaches, surfing, and theme parks. Most recently, though, it also became home of the Jilling, the history of which, up until now, has mostly been one of success and cooperation. And yet, although its goal has remained the same, something has obviously changed. At the time when the network was proposed, the city was struggling from a bursting population, whose main problem was that most people lived in a line along the coast, thus creating massive traffic bottlenecks as people could only use the Gold Coast Highway to go from one side of the city to the other, instead of spreading around a city core and using a radial road network as is normal in most cities. So, starting in the early 2000s, the city stumbled on the unprecedented idea of improving its public transportation, with a mix of bus, monorail, and light rail options being considered. And I say they wanted to improve it because the Gold Coast already had a bus and monorail system, though the network was admittedly pretty useless at it, with a 2007 survey showing that a large group of people were, quote, very dissatisfied with the bus system due to unreliability, uncleanliness, overcrowding, and insecurity. So, pretty much everything. As such, when the time came to choose what transport mode to improve the city with, it's no surprise that over 70% of locals said they preferred the light rail. And so it became that by 2011, construction on Stage 1 started, with the system opening to resounding success in 2014. Though, why is this relevant to Stage 4, you may ask? Well, because since that time, almost a decade ago, there is pretty much nothing that has gone wrong enough to justify the turn of events. In fact, it's been the complete opposite, with studies coming out and repeatedly showing the light rail's positive effects on the city, such as a decrease in traffic, stronger public transit use, and a 30% increase in property values across the line, which made the city's decision to expand the system in multiple phases pretty self explanatory, with Stage 2 completing in 2017, Stage 3 due to open in 2026, and Stage 4 stretching the line all the way to the airport while encountering a slightly different story. Okay, so enough of the context. Why was Stage 4 actually cancelled? Well, the actual reason consists of a three-part answer, and as such, I'll start with the official reason given by the government, and that is the price tag. The first official estimate for Stage 4 was released around 2022, when the project was set to cost around 2.7 billion Australian dollars. Now, the figure is obviously a lot higher than the previous stages, with Stage 1, 2, and 3 having cost around 1.2, 0.4, and 1.5 billion Australian dollars, respectively. However, when you account for inflation, I think this was still acceptable. What the government did not consider acceptable was the 9.85 billion Australian dollar estimate that emerged in 2025. Though, as the Gold Coast mayor Tom Tate said in an interview, the figure just couldn't be right.
That figure's way off from an engineering point of view. And what are the tracks gold plated?
And look, in normal circumstances, you would have just believed these extraordinary numbers to be true. However, there is actually reason to doubt these numbers. Not only because it would be staggering to think you can spend more per kilometer on a surface light rail than a metro system running through the middle of Sydney, but also because there are signs that the Queensland state government might have been setting up the system for failure. See, in October of 2024, the state of Queensland held an election in which the Liberal National Party, led by this guy, replaced the Labour government. As such, a shift occurred from a rather pro-Liberal government to one that promised to be more financially responsible, take into account local concerns, and who, in the words of the opposition, never wanted the Liberal to begin with.
What David Crisafulli is trying to do here is use reviews, use excuses, use weasel words to get out of a project that he's never supported on the Gold Coast.
And of course, this part is mostly speculative. There is no real way to know for certain whether the government intended for the project to fail beyond looking at the facts and deciding for oneself. Yet, you cannot fail to see the mayor's opinion on this. Because even if the higher budget were true, this administration has been misinforming the public by pushing out the worst case scenario figure and has also refused to release any information that would help to explain why exactly the cost has gotten so out of hand. As well, another fact is that leading up to the cancellation, the same government announced that 235 properties along the route would be taken up for the project. Yet, they forgot to mention whose homes would be taken, which, in the words of the Gold Coast mayor, had simply served to frighten residents. Because not only did people not know what homes were on the way, but most owners were actually set to lose as little as a meter from their block. Though, again, whilst I personally believe that the state did attempt to scrap the project, I do need to reiterate that this is simply an opinion. There is really no way to verify whether this is indeed part of the reason that the project was cancelled. Though, moving on, there is still one final reason that might help explain the choice. The local opposition sort of began around 2020, when it first emerged that Stage 4 would run through Palm Beach and not around it, as the residents in the borough had wanted. Though, when analyzing why exactly they didn't want a tram to serve them, they didn't seem to have many actual reasons, aside from the fact that they didn't want any high rise development in their area and that they hated the light rail no matter what.
People are very passionate about this area. It's already been half destroyed by the high density high rises. We're not going to let the light rail come through and destroy the rest of it. We do not want the light rail no matter what.
Of course, high rise development could probably have been avoided through local regulations. Yet they still opted to fight against a public service instead of high rise developers, in part because they had other so proclaimed reasons.
An independent report found locals were concerned with parking, project costs, environmental impacts, and overdevelopment with the current proposal.
Ah, yes. Not only does an electric powered mass transit system cause higher pollution than a collapsed highway, but it apparently increases traffic congestion when it has been proven that it lowers it.
The government claiming this decision saves 1,100 beachside car parks.
Yeah, I've got nothing. It's a good point. No one wants to replace a few parking spaces for a light rail that removes cars as well. Though, setting the irony aside, what is sad to me is that the government seemingly used the opinion from this loud minority to create a whole narrative in which the whole city is against the light rail, when a survey released in April of this year shows that 74% of the residents in Gold Coast want the expansion, with only 54% of those living in the communities affected being opposed. Yet, the government still launched a public consultation that has been accused of being flawed due to favoring those opposed to the line. Then, when the results came up as negative, they used the narrative that they were listening to public concerns, together with the cost, to justify the cancellation. In what is an unfortunate mix of political interests, only made worse by a small minority of residents who, in the words of Tom Tate, waited for the first three stages to be fully funded before saying, well, now that it's in my backyard, I don't want stage 4. Though in the end you are free to make up your own opinions on the matter, it's just sad that such a successful light rail has seen its expansion thwarted for what ends up being a mix of bad politics, a lack of will to do things in the right way, and a set of neighbors who were willing to do anything to stop the project. And thus, in the end, whether the government listens to the transit experts by reversing its position, or whether it sticks to building an enhanced bus corridor in its place with no dedicated lanes, it is irrefutable that the Gold Coast just missed out on a magnificent opportunity. Though for now, only waiting remains, and it shall be seen whether the decision was worth it or whether it will go down as one of Queensland's greatest misses.